Wait, which room is this? Is this the RGB sequence room? Is this the right room?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
No, it's Wally's, isn't it?
Yeah, this is
Oh,
Wally's.
well, then I got
Wally's
the wrong.
lights.
Oh boy. All right. Well, we will rectify that here in a second.
All right, Carl, you're going to give the wrong sponsorship away.
Yeah, I know. Here it is, right there. Whoop, no, that's wired walks. There we go. There's Wally's lights. All right.
Okay, okay.
All
I
right.
got my recording going, and you know what? It's 12:30. So,
All right.
all right. We want to welcome everybody to the 2021 Virtual Christmas Summit, brought to you by Buscoya Studio. This presentation today is sponsored by Wally's Lights. We don't want anybody to unmute themselves or interrupt the presenter today. Feel free to put any questions you have or discussion in the chat, and we will try and answer your questions as we go. Today, Carl is going to be talking to us today about Audacity and what it is and how to use it. Carl's been in the lighting world for many years and is very knowledgeable. And ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to Carl.
Thank you, Don. And Bobby will make sure that he tells everybody that I've been around for many years. He likes to reiterate that. So let me go ahead and get the presentation up here. Where did it go? Did we close out the presentation? Hang on one second. One. All right. So, hello, my name is Carl Mirsky. This class is really it's kind of an introduction to Audacity. So kind of walking through. I also do voiceovers. If you've heard jingle bumpers, I've been doing those since about 2015 for the community. And I started using Audacity actually for doing that and for doing some semi-commercial work. And then I do currently use Adobe Audition, which if we have time, I'll kind of show you that a little bit. So, but for the most part, you can pretty much do everything in Audacity that you can do with paid software. So Audacity is free. It's open source. It's available on many platforms. So you've got Linux and Mac and Windows, and those are pretty much the primary ones. There's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of plugins. We'll talk about that in a little bit. There's a lot of feature and function to it. It's really grown over the course of the last few years. Again, as Don said, and Bobby will always remind me that I've been doing lighting for many years. I actually started doing lighting in 2010, and as you can see, there's really not much of a difference from me during the normal year and then when Christmas comes around. But like everybody else in this hobby, this is a full-time hobby for us. So for Audacity, basically it is available to anybody. You can download it. They just released 3.0, and 3.0 did add a lot of new features and capabilities into it. And really all you have to do is go to audacityteam.org and download it. And again, they have the different versions there. It's real simple to install, nothing magical. And what I'm going to do here is, because you don't want to see my face anymore, I am going to do this. All right. So once you've gone ahead and got it downloaded, then you just go ahead and install it. This is what you're going to see, and when we bring up the window and actually do the demonstration, you'll kind of see there's a lot of buttons and a lot of graphs and a lot of things going on. But once you use it, it is a very intuitive tool, and everything is it's customizable for your needs. So all of these screens and menus, for the most part, can be moved around for your look and feel. So as you start using Audacity more and more, and you get you get a good feel for it, you may want to shift things around. I pretty much leave everything as default when I'm using Audacity. And again, if anybody has any questions, go ahead and you can use the little raise hand thing in Zoom, and or put it in the chat, and maybe one of these guys will smack me in the back of the head and let me know that there's a question. So anyway, before we really get into the tool, I want to talk a little bit about gear, hardware. So microphones and headphones. So again, I do a lot of voice work, a lot of audio work. So microphones and headphones are a big part of what I do. Even if you're doing this, just to go ahead and clean up or create your audio, you really want to have good gear. It's really important. You can buy headphones anywhere from, you can buy $10 headphones, you can buy $200 headphones or more. The ones, if you saw, the ones that I'm wearing right now are these, the Bear Dynamic 770s. They're between $100 and $200. You can usually get them on sale at Amazon. Hands down, the best headphones I think you can buy. They're the most comfortable. I wear these things pretty much every day for hours on end, without without any kind of discomfort. The Audio Technica ATH M40Xs are also great headphones. I use those for several years. They hold up very well, and I think they're right around. You can usually get them on sale for about $80 to $100. So really good gear. We'll talk about speakers again too. When you're listening to music and you want to hear what it sounds like, get some good speakers. They don't have to be the most expensive, but you don't want the $10 little speakers, because those things you're not going to get a good sound out of. And don't use Bluetooth. Again, you're going to hear that from a lot of people, but in this hobby, using Bluetooth is not going to help you, and it's really going to hurt you. Matter of fact, Jason Rasmussen did a presentation right before this one, and he talks a little bit more about that and more about the other side of the audio on the listening end, and what you hear is what you see kind of thing. Microphones, again, there's different type of microphones. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, except to say that if you're going to do any kind of voice work, or you want to do your own voiceovers, or you just want to add some commentary, get a good mic. All microphones are basically the same. There's a difference. There's dynamic microphones, condenser microphones, USB, XLR, a lot of terms. For the most part, the major difference is how they interface with your computer. So I use, let's see, where was it here? This is what I use, and it's a Rode microphone. It's an NT1 microphone. It looks exactly like this. It is a condenser mic. I've been using it for several years. Prior to that, I did use the Blue Yeti, and that is a USB mic. USB mics have gotten a lot better over the course of the last few years, so I still think the Yeti is one of the better mics out there, and they even have a version that does also work with the XLR. And again, you'll find XLR as more standard in the audio engineering community. And then these are the interfaces you would go ahead and use for the microphone with your computer. So, a mixing desk, or like this is a Focusrite. It's a plug-in basically, but it works very well. And you can always, feel free to contact me, IM me, ping me if you have any questions on this, and I can answer some questions for you. All right, so within Audacity, we're going to break it down into some of the key areas and some of the things you want to look at when you're installing Audacity. This is going to be your top menu. You're going to spend a lot of time up in here with the tools. All of these tools have shortcuts, so you can use, just like anything else, you got function keys, and so these would all correlate to that. So again, audio, there's different types of audio connections. Direct sound is probably, I think it's when they say newer, probably within the last 10 years or so it came out. It's preferred to use for any kind of audio, whether it's music, whether it's voice. There's less latency, so the time that I'm speaking versus what you're hearing, there'll be less latency there. MME that you'll see is pretty much an industry standard, so it'll work across platforms. And I'll show you that again. You can go in there. The microphone, again, if I didn't say this before, but don't use your built-in mic. They're terrible. They're not designed for what we do. So yeah, just try to get an external mic. We'll talk about playback in a minute. Also, most microphones, if you do use a mic, set it to mono recording. Most microphones do not record in stereo. If you put it in stereo mode, you're only going to get one side of the audio. There is a way to create stereo even within Audacity, and I'll show you that as well. And then the sound driver, again, what do you have? Do you have different audio interfaces? Do you have headphones? Do you have speakers? Again, the whole Bluetooth conversation. Then in the interface, you'll see as far as the project rate or hertz of the audio. 44,100 is the standard. 48,000 is better. I'll use 48,000 when I'm doing audio work, but 44,100 gives you a good sound. You're not going to be able to perceive the difference within there, and then we'll talk about levels.
Carl, can I interrupt you for just 1 second?
Sure.
People are saying that your screen is blurry and they're having trouble seeing it.
Blurry. Okay.
I don't know if you want to stop sharing and reshare. Try that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, let me do that.
Okay.
Let me hang on 1 second. Happens sometimes. That's one of the issues with OBS. Let me.
Could you just go to an old-fashioned screen share?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and reshare. Where'd my find my Zoom settings here? They got lost, and there we go. Share. Hang on. Got that. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Wow.
Oh yeah, sure.
Don, you have to make him co-host.
Yeah.
I'll just there you go.
Yeah, go ahead and make me co-host, and then I can go ahead and share. Host disabled participant
There you are.
screen sharing.
Try that now.
That should be better. There. Is that better?
Oh, that's crisp, yeah.
Okay. Yep. Sorry about that. All right. So let's go back to where we were. All right. We talked about microphones. We went back here. Okay. So preferences. There's a lot of preferences within Audacity. We'll walk through some of those and how you can set them. Most of the time, I leave the preferences as default. There's also the toolbar. So these are the tools that we're going to, again, walk through as far as, what they do, how to use them. Again, the primary focus of this discussion is going to be on doing audio. So how do you manipulate your audio? Saving and exporting. So again, like every other tool, Audacity gives you the ability to save in pretty much almost any audio format, including an open source format. So there's two ways to save within Audacity. There's saving a project. And so a project file is taking all of your audio and combining it into a working subset, which again, you'll see on the screen. So it doesn't really create an audio file, but it basically takes all those components and all of the changes and effects that you're doing, and it creates that script so that then when you save the file, it combines it all together. You have compressed, lossless audio, and I'll explain that a little bit. So a lot of times everything we've done in the past and coming back from the old CD days were MP3s, right? Everything was an MP3, a digital file was an MP3. You have WAV files, there's other files. So a WAV file is going to give you your truest audio. So there's not going to be any compression. You're not going to lose any audio. So it's what you get here is what you get. An MP3 is going to be compressed first, primarily saving of space. So what they do is they remove a lot of the audio bits in there to go ahead and compress the file, especially for when you're sending files back and forth, and also for just for transmitting purposes. Again, most people don't even notice it. If you heard one against the other, the normal person's ear is not going to be able to differentiate between the two. We've used MP3s as a role in our world, but you can use WAV files. I think Xlights even supports WAV files. Importing files, we'll walk through that a little bit on how you can bring files in. Saving and exporting, so this is where you would actually save a project and then export your audio to create that new audio file. Some terms that we use, these are pretty common. So amplifying the sound, so you're basically changing the volume of the audio. So what it does is everything is relative within the volume and the tracks that are there in the audio. So it doesn't change any of the nuances on the highs and the lows. It just increases or decreases basically the relative sound. Crossfading is pretty common. You've heard it when you go from one transition, one audio file to another, or one song to another, or one sequence to another, where you have that smooth transition. So the volume will go down while the other one comes up. Same thing with fade in, fade out. You fade out where you're ending an audio track, or sometimes you'll fade in when you want to go ahead and bring it up, rather than it being a hard start or stop. There's also a term that you'll see called studio fade. I use the studio fade a lot. And what they do is it actually sounds more like a professional fade. Sometimes the standard fade in and the fade out is pretty abrupt. This really has more of like the movie tone. Again, it's a nuance, and some people can hear it, some people can't. And then there's normalize. So some people, again, you get the terms normalize and amplify, and the two are a lot of times used interchangeably. They really aren't. Normalize, think about the tool called MP3 Gain, and many of you have heard of that, where you're normalizing your audio, you're making it all sound the same. But what that does is it really sets the highs, it sets your high mark. So once you normalize your track, it's kind of like, if you ever heard of the term with a Bose, no highs, no lows, it must be Bose. That's kind of what normalizing does, in theory. Again, there's a lot of value to normalizing. There's a reason for normalizing. But again, some people can overdo it, and it makes your audio muddy. Some other terms in here, LUFS. So that's kind of a newer term. So first let's talk about what we're dealing with is RMS. And when you see the meters on the audio, what you're really looking at is the actual sound, or the electronic version of the sound. So what you're seeing is the electrical impulses that sound wave is making. And that's typically what we've used to say you never want to go above, say, 0 decibels, right? 0 decibels is the ceiling. If you go above 0, now you start getting, you're peaking. You get a lot of crackling, because now you're basically distorting the audio, right? You don't want to do that. So typically we'll say never, when I render audio, I stay usually anywhere -1 dB to give myself a little more headroom. LUFS, on the other hand, came out of the audio industry, mainly for radio, and then more recently with podcasting. So, for instance, Apple, when you send a podcast and you have it submitted on Apple, pretty much they want it to be -16 LUF, right? Or loudness units relative to full scale. So you're not really changing the sound, you're changing the relative sound. And so the concept is that when you're doing a podcast, you want to get as much headroom as possible. You want to get as much volume out of your audio, but you want it to get to a point where you reach that LUF, so that when you're listening to a podcast, online, in your car, at home, you're not getting those highs and lows where you're going to have to turn the volume up, and next thing you know, your ears get blasted out. And then there's compression. And compression is another term that you'll hear, and people say, oh yeah, compress the audio, it'll get deeper, it'll get fatter, you'll sound like a radio announcer. Well, the problem with compression is it's actually there's a lot of science that goes into compression, and there's a lot of components to it. So what you're really doing is you're raising the softer sounds, the quieter sounds, you're decreasing the louder sounds, so it compresses that sound. So in the case of an audio file, you really are you're really making it sound more dynamic. Or in the case of a radio announcer, you're really making it sound deeper. It sounds brighter. The problem a lot of people do is they'll compress too much, and then it sounds like you're talking into a tin can. So with that said, we're going to go into the tool, but I want to stop and see if there's any questions or comments. Okay. All right, so let me get this out of the way. And look if this works. So this is what you're going to see when you first open up Audacity. And again, we'll walk through some of the files and settings. So we talked about the preferences, and the preference screen is going to give you some of the things you've seen before. Again, your devices, we'll talk about this in a second. Your playback devices, so you got speakers, you have speakers in your, if you have speakers in your monitors, they're going to show up here. If you have multiple, a different sound card, it's going to show here. So whatever you have as your audio, it's going to show up here, and that's where sound is going to get ported out to. Recording, again, what are you recording from? Again, these are your defaults. So do you have multiple microphones? Do you have an audio interface? So I use a tool called Voicemeter, which really is an audio enhancement tool. It's like a pre-processing tool. And then how many channels and everything else. Playback. Again, these are settings you can kind of play with. MIDI, if you're into music. If anybody's into MIDI here, you can actually use this to create and generate MIDI audio. Here's where you would set up your audio quality. Again, we talked about the sample rate, or kilohertz here, so or hertz. So typically 44.1 is the standard. 48, they're not discernible. You really can't tell the difference. I leave pretty much the rest of these as is, as the default. Again, local interface, how you do tracks. A lot of these we just leave it alone. Libraries aren't really important at this point. Directories, if you have a default directory, temp directory, and then shortcuts. So you can always look in here and see what your shortcuts are. And as you can see, there's a ton of them. So as you start working in the tool, you're going to want to start using shortcuts. It just makes your processing a lot easier. That's your, those are your properties. And then we get into the settings here. So we talked a little bit about here, direct sound. So like here we have MME, direct sound, and Wasapi, and I'll talk about Wasapi too as part of this. So again, I try to use direct sound. If direct sound doesn't seem to work, you can always fall back into MME, and I'll show you a demo on the Wasapi. Again, microphone, it's whatever you have set up as your primary, or if you want to change it. Recording, and we're not going to do a lot of real microphone recording here, but again, like I said, if you're doing audio recording, you're going to want to set this to mono unless you have a true stereo mic, and that's what you're doing. If anybody here is into doing a podcast or thought about doing a podcast, you'd use two separate mics, and then you would also record on two separate tracks, which is the way you should be doing it. And then my speaker, so I'm actually porting out through an interface. I hope it works. We'll see if you can hear it here in a little bit. And then we get into our audio adjusting sounds here. So let's, I'm going to go ahead and open up a file. We will go and open up a project file. Okay, so remember I talked about, let's see if I got one here. Yeah, we'll take this one. All right, so we're going to open up a project file, and we're going to walk through this as an example here. So as you can see, this is what's the WAV file. This is what you're going to hear and how the sound is actually projected. What you'll notice here is I have two different tracks, and this track is actually looks a lot quieter than the second track, and that's because it is. So this is an actual audio recording here, and then this is more of a voice. But Again, if you try to run these together, one would think that the audio would overpower the actual voice, right? So we'll walk through that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a snippet here, and let me know if you can hear this, and if you can, then we can go through, because I did have to make some adjustments on the audio because of the way that Zoom works. Sometimes it's too loud, sometimes it's just right. So I'm going to play a snippet here. Let me know if it sounds okay.
Yes, we can
Is
hear
that
it.
loud enough? Can you hear that? Okay.
It is quiet, but we can hear it.
Okay, and yeah, because sometimes it does overpower. So that's one of the nuances of Zoom. Sometimes what you hear in your headphone is not what's being sent out. So yeah, we'll work through that, and I'll show you that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close this. Oops. And I'm going to create a new file, and I'm just going to create an audio file here so you can kind of see up here what we were talking about with sound. So within Audacity, you have a few control areas, right? So I'll go through the tools too, because these are kind of going to be this is going to be your main area here. This is going to be your select tool. So we're going to record an audio file real here. So this is a test audio voiceover for VCS 2021. All right. I can actually probably pump that up just a little bit. So what I'm going to do now, just to play it back, use the space bar. Audio voiceover for VCS 2021. Okay, could you hear that?
Yes, we sure could. Yeah.
All right. So, so in that case now, as you noticed here, and I'm going to go ahead and put this on monitor, and I'm going to start monitoring. So as you see when I'm talking, you're looking at the level here. And again, this is your decibels, and you can change this. So when you're doing recording, you never want to go above 0. So right now, this is what's tuned in. If I had to adjust it, I could adjust it here over the recording volume, or if I had a separate mixer, I could do it there. But from an audio recording perspective, I'm at the right level. On playback, it's kind of the same thing, right? So on playback here, if I'm hitting this 0 mark, that means I'm getting too loud, and now we're clipping, and clipping as a term means I'm cutting off some of the audio, and that's a bad thing. You get a lot of distortion, and you can't fix it. So we'll walk through, just with this file to use as an example, is you can see here, and what Audacity gives you a lot of ability on how you view a file, right? So I'm just going to stretch this out a little bit, and as you can see, we're actually looking at this, and we're looking at the actual wave file that's created. Now, if I wanted to make this bigger, we have what's called effects, and effects are there's a lot of them, right? There's a ton of effects within Audacity, and so one of those effects we talked about a little bit was Amplify and Normalize. So Amplify here, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and make this louder. So you notice here, relatively, I'm shooting for anywhere between -1 and 1 on this scale, right? That's a relative scale. So what happens is when I go to Amplify, Audacity automatically knows, hey, if I want to get to -0, which is my peak, that's my ceiling, I've got to amplify by 4.37 decibels. Now, they give you the ability to allow clipping. We don't want to do that. But I don't want to hit 0. I want to kind of bring it down a little bit. So I'm going to say, yeah, bring me down to about, 1. I can also go into here, and I can put in -1. Okay. And again, for audio, it's the same thing, and we'll use a music file as an example. So what I've done now is I've gone ahead and done that. I can preview it, but once I hit it, now you can see it raised it. Now you notice it raised everything relative, right? So you notice that it went by whatever this peak here was and raised everything up. So I'll give you an example. So this is a test audio voiceover for VCS 2021. Okay, so it really didn't do a whole lot, except I raised everything exponentially. Now I can always do Control-Z to go back if I figured out I did something I didn't want to do that. It's like anything else. Most of your standard window keyboard commands work. Okay. So now I want to do what's called Normalize. And so, and again, in this one, so we're going to go to Effect, and we're going to do normalize. Now what normalize does, it kind of does the same thing, but you notice it's going to make the other sounds fatter. So this is a test audio voiceover for VCS 2021. So it'll change the actual waveform on some of the other areas. Now there's other things you can do. There's a term called compression. And compression is, everyone says, oh, you should compress your audio, make it sound deeper, make it sound fatter. I don't like to compress a lot because, again, then it starts sounding dull and muffled. And it sounds like you're actually talking into your hand. So you don't want to do that. All right. So amplify, normalize, loudness normalization. This is where we talked about LUFS. Remember what we said about LUFS. So there's RMS, which is your actual decibels, or perceived loudness. Now, again, this was that conversation of, if I was to do a podcast and I was to send this to Apple, they require me to have minus 16 LUFS as their standard. So if I hit that, you notice that it really fattened up that audio, but look what we've got here. Now, this isn't necessarily a peak here. It's actually, this is another tool that they use where you can actually look at your audio. So we're kind of at that point, but I'll go ahead and play it now. You'll hear the difference. This is a test audio voiceover. Let me start right over here. So this is a test audio voiceover for VCS 2021. So this would be taking all the audio I had, whether it's voice, whether it's music, and it would take all of those, and it would create it would, again, increase the lows, decrease the highs, and it's kind of like, so when you're listening to it, you get more of a balanced sound. And it's really important if you have multiple people talking or different audio files where you got some that's really, really quiet. And so I'll show you an example of that, where I've got audio that's really, really quiet, then audio that's really, really loud, and you have to turn your volume up, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, your volume's up, and now it gets to the loud part, and it blows your ears out. So those are some of the major effects that we're going to use. There's a lot here. When you start doing this, and even with your music, you may want to use this. So fade in, fade out. We'll walk through some of these. Change tempo, change speed, change pitch. The other nice thing about using Audacity is you don't have to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on a commercial audio project, right? You can actually use third-party plugins. So the plugins here are what they call VST plugins. They are third-party plugins that some are free, some you can purchase. And I use these when I'm doing work within Adobe Audition. But they also they port over into Audacity nicely. That's why I said you can actually use Audacity to create professional quality audio files. So for instance, if I wanted to go ahead and take this file, and let's say I wanted to level the audio or make it deeper or auto EQ or any of these, I could do that. So we'll use the voice deepener, for example. So this is a test audio voiceover. Now, sometimes the preview, you do have a preview mode. Sometimes with these VST plugins, the preview mode doesn't necessarily work just because of the nature of the way that the plugins work. But if I go ahead and I change this, and I'm gonna pump this all the way up, and I'm gonna apply it, you're gonna notice what it really did to it. It really fattened that audio file up.
So this is a test audio.
Now that sounds really bad, right? So you got to kind of play with it, find out where your mark would be, and again, it really helps you to produce better quality audio files. Again, most of the effects I'll use are the ones I showed you. So noise reduction is another one. Noise reduction is kind of an interesting one, and I'll show you that too. And even in audio, sometimes you get audio, especially if it's live audio, you'll get a lot of background noise. So how do you? So let me take this part here, and what I can do is I can just drag, and it'll actually let me select that section of the audio file. So if you're recording voice, you typically want to go ahead and leave maybe, I only left a little bit, but 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds. But you probably it's not short enough, But if I did a recording of right now, you'd probably pick up some background noise. So how do I get rid of background noise? What I would do is I'd use an effect called noise, noise reduction. So in noise reduction, what I'm doing is I'm actually getting a noise profile here. So it allows me to go ahead and it actually takes a sample of that. And now what I can do is I can go back into the file, right? And now it actually has calculated what that noise is, where it's picking that up. And now I can go through the whole file and I can remove that noise. So if there was any kind of fans or electric hum or air conditioner or, you know, whatever, I can apply it against this whole audio file. It's really good, again, if you have music that was created live, or the copy of music that you have, it's just got a lot of muddy noise in there. It works. Okay. Let me close out of that, and we'll show you an example with an audio file on how this can help you in the hobby to create your own music. So I'm going to go ahead, and I've got a couple samples here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this audio file, which is from Charlie Brown. It's Hark the Herald Angels Sing. And it's really long, right? So it's almost 2 minutes long. Now let's say that this part here, I don't want to use this, right? I want it to start, I want my file to start here. So I want it to actually start here, but I don't need all this, right? So I can cut that out. And this is the beauty of having a project file, is I can save this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save the project. And again, it gives me an opportunity to save it as a lossless copy or a compressed copy. I would recommend, unless you're doing this as a demo or sending it to somebody to listen to and say, hey, is this what you want? I would do it as a lossless copy, because again, if I save it as a compressed copy, I'm going to lose some of the dynamics in the audio. So I'm just going to do a save. I'm just going to do a save project as, and it'll save it as a lossless copy. And I'm just going to call this VCS. Okay. So now that I've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to use some of the tools that I have. Now, if I want to cut this, right, I can just hit the delete key. And you notice it not only cut out the section that I highlighted, but it moved the rest of the audio over. So delete, it works instantaneously. Again, I can undo it, so I'm not actually affecting the original audio file. I can also use this, let's see if I can make that bigger. I can use this here, which is the cut tool, which does the same thing. Okay? So within Audacity, there's, like everything else, there's a lot of different ways to accomplish the same thing. If I wanted to duplicate this, I could do a copy, and I could go ahead and copy it and put it on the back end if I wanted to replicate it. A lot of times folks will want to replicate a section of audio for whatever reason, and so again, it's real easy to do a copy and paste using the same concept, or cut and paste. The other tools you see here are trim audio outside the selection. So what is that? That means that if I wanted this part here, and I didn't want this, so if I was coming from here, and I wanted to go right into the chorus, what I could do is I could go ahead and I could find my mark. And again, what I could do is play it from that mark. Right, so you can always, if you want to scroll, you can use your control and scroll wheel. You can also up here use your zoom in, zoom out. You can use your plus and minus on your keyboard. Again, many different ways to do this. And so what I want to do is I want to take this part out, and I want it to seamlessly go into this audio here. So what I can do is here you say trim audio outside the selection. What does that do? That's going to remove everything on either end. Well, that's not what I want, right? Because if I do that, it's going to remove everything which is negative of what I wanted. So again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to say I want to delete this. So what I do is again hit delete. And now when I play the audio, you can see that it just basically created an audio file. Simplest thing you can do. And again, when we're creating sequences, a lot of times you want to take out, you got a 5-minute or 6-minute audio file, you want to render it down to say 2 or 3 minutes, where a lot of the Trans-Siberian Orchestra audio is like that, where it's a lot of repetition within the music. So you can trim a lot of that out and then create a very compact file, still get what you want. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do there is, let's say that I wanted to fade out sooner than the end here, right? Let's say I wanted to fade out here. I wanted to do a nice fade. So what I can do is, again, I can select this and cut it, and then using my other effect, my fade out effect or studio fade, I can highlight that, go into effect, and we'll just do a fade out, right? I go into fade out, and you notice now it brought us a fade out. Now, if you want it to fade out quicker, you can go into effect and it'll do repeat fade out, or Control R is repeat. So I wanted to do that. I want to make it a little more, and then I'll do it one more time. So I'm going to hit Control R. And now when we play that, so now you notice that, and it did that. And again, all along, I can always go back, I can undo, I can Control Z to go back. So you could do the same thing on the front. I mean, so there's a lot of capability there. If I've got a file that I want to add some silence, but I don't necessarily want to shift it, there's another tool called the silence tool, which is right here. Control L, where now it's basically created silence or no noise in that section for whatever reason. So if you've got an audio file, you want to keep the length, but you don't want to hear the audio that's in that section, you can use silence. So this is really your kind of your select tool, where you can go through and you can select different sections. This tool here is your envelope tool. I don't use this a whole lot, but again, the envelope tool gives you the ability to kind of change your audio. So if I wanted to change the volume of my audio, I can click here, and now I can compress it. So this will actually decrease the sound. So if I've got something else coming under it, you'll see here, oh, let me go back to my select tool. And it makes it just a little bit quieter, right? So, and then there's a couple other tools on here. There's the move tool. So the move tool allows me to shift an audio or a section of audio back and forth. And then there's the multi-tool. I'm not going to get, this tool here is the draw tool. I'm not really going to get into that. That's more if you wanted to, let's say you wanted to remove a section of audio, you can really scroll down and you could remove, let's say you got a click or a buzz or just a sound that you really wanted to kind of clean up. You could get in there and you could mark it and you could decrease it. And then we have the multi-tool, and the multi-tool basically does everything. I don't use the multi-tool because I have a habit of hitting the wrong thing. So the other things you have on here are you can generate different sound effects. You can, there's your silence. You can generate a tone. You can generate like a phone tone, the DTMF that you'd hear like on an old telephone, a chirp if you wanted to mark a section in audio. Again, a lot of capability within the tool. So how does that help you? So I'm going to open up the example here. Let's see. So what I've done. Where'd it go? All right. There it is. Okay. So what I did here, and I'm gonna mute this for 1 second here. So this is pretty common. It's been around for a while, but I created a version of this for my display. I probably going back when I was still doing Lightorama. So here's the first part. This is the speech by Linus. See how quiet that is? I'm only hitting probably about -18, a little over. You can see the mark here. So let's say -15. And there's a big pause here, right? So what do I do? So now it gets into his speech. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to add the music in there while it's playing that. So what I did was I went ahead and I grabbed the audio from that, and I strategically want to place it in here, but I don't want this long drawn out pause. It's great for television. It's really bad unless you want to do a dramatic, several second pause in your display when you have lights showing. But that's a 5-second delay. I don't think you want that, right? Now what I can do is I can actually lock these tracks, or I can delete at the same time. So let's say I've got this lined up exactly where I want it, but I want to remove this silence. So what I can do is I can go here. I think this should work. And I want to get rid of this silence. So what I'll do is I'll go here into both tracks and select the silence here and hit delete. And you notice now it shifted everything over. And I want to do it again here because I don't want all of that silence. We'll hit delete, and now let's see what we have.
And there were in the same country shepherds, abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night.
So now what I've done is I basically created what would be called a mashup. And you can do this with any audio files, and it goes through and now you notice the song is way longer than this, right? And I don't really want that. I want it to end at the 1 minute 45 second mark. So what I'm going to do here is and now I want to cut it right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to delete it, right? And now I'm going to use that fade. I'm going to select it. I'm going to go into effect, and this time I'm going to find the let's see, it should be down here. Should be studio fade out. Again, it looks the same as the other one, but nope. So what I've now done is I've actually created a new audio file. So instead of it being 2 to 3 minutes long, now I have a little less than a minute 45 seconds for my display. So what I want to do now is I want to save this. So I'm going to save my project. I've already named it, so I just hit save. And let me see if I go into but what it'll do is it's actually going to create a it's going to create whoops, really want to hear Baby Shark. I don't think anybody else does. What it does is it creates these files, and these files are what it uses to, when you bring your project back up, it marks exactly what sections of the audio you've gone ahead and you've manipulated. And so now in order to save it, we're at the last part here. What I'm going to do is export. And so to export a file, I'm going to export it. You can export it MP3 is pretty common. Again, a WAV file is going to be a lossless, so you're not going to lose any fidelity, right? MP3, you're not going to notice the difference. Back in the day, you had to save everything as a constant bit rate because Lightorama and I think even X-Lights, early versions of X-Lights, wouldn't work with what they call variable bit rates. So we had to save everything at a constant 192 kilobits per second. Now we have what's called a preset. There's different options in here. Play around with it. This seems to be a pretty good standard, Extreme 220, 260. It works good. It should work with your version of X-Lights or Lightorama or whatever you're using. If you notice that your audio doesn't sync up with your lights, then you might want to go ahead and resave it as a constant bit rate 192, and you shouldn't have any problems. But for the most part, this is what I've been using, and I don't have any issues with it. I actually use Audacity for all of my audio edits, for normalizing audio. I'm going to save this. I'm going to mix it down to a single file. Here it has the original audio in here that came from the CD that I used, right? So it saves all that metadata, and now what I end up getting is an MP3 file. Let's see, which could be in here. Let's see when this is. I don't have the date on there, but it'll be one of these. It'll save it as an MP3 file, and then you can go ahead and play it as you normally would. Probably not going to be able to hear this. I don't
Isn't
know.
there anyone who knows what
So now it
Christmas is all
created my
about?
file,
Sure,
and it's a
Charlie
minute
Brown, I
33
can tell you.
seconds. So I've effectively created that audio file.
We
One
got
more
about,
thing.
Carl, we got about 10 minutes left.
Yep, thanks, Don. So the other thing I wanted to show you, we talked about, remember, normalizing the audio. I don't have a lot of time to show you, but feel free to ping me offline. Let's say you have two files that both, again, one is louder than the other. What I can do is I can select all of that audio, right? And then I can go into Effect and Normalize, like we did before. Here we are. And what it'll do is it'll decrease the louder audio, it'll increase the softer audio, and then what you end up with is, at the end of the day, you end up with both audio being at a more relative volume. So that's pretty much it. Those are the basics. Tomorrow I'm doing another session on using free video tools out there for creating your videos of your displays. So if any of you come back to that session and you have a couple of questions on this, feel free to ask, or again, IM me or email me or whatever. So, questions? All right. Well, I think we're good.
One fellow's got a question in chat. What do you think are the best plugins to add to Audacity to help build timing and breakout notes for programming lights to music?
Okay, so interesting enough, there is an effect. So you can actually add. You can analyze. So within, the Queen Mary Vamp plugins that you talk about in X-Lights, they're right here, right? They're the same plugins that you would use in X-Lights. So you can actually do beat and bar trackers. So it'll go through and it'll create those automatically. You can also do what's called labels. So I can actually add, by going into tracks and add new, I can create a tracks, add new, I can add a label track. And so label tracks, again, give me the ability to mark certain areas of, so this is going to be section 1. So now what I can do is I can use this track to mark where I want in the audio. It also gives you the ability to split audio into multiple different audio files, so you can create multiple versions of a file using this. But there's beat and bar trackers all the way in there. There are some third-party plugins, but you know what, I found that using the ones that are built in work just as well, and they're native to the tool. Again, same ones you'd use with X-Lights.
Question in the chat. How do you cut out a voiceover but keep the beat timing?
How do you cut out a voiceover but keep the beat? So, are you talking about removing the actual voiceover from the audio?
Believe that's what he's asking, yeah.
Audacity does give you a way to do that. And I wish we had a little more time here, but what you do is, I think they natively added it. So what they added was, I want to say it is a vocal remover, right? Or vocal reduction and isolation. So it used to be, what we had to do was create a negative image of the audio, place it in a separate track, and then we could go ahead and negate those, and it would remove. It's really a center channel, right? So most audio sits on the center channel, and so it could remove it. So here, if I wanted to remove vocals from a separate audio track, I would go ahead and just do this. I'd use the defaults. If there was one track and it had vocals in there, it works somewhat, again, because it's embedded in a file. It's a lot harder because it's part of that audio file. You're not going to get rid of all of it, but the tool does a pretty good job of removing the vocals, because again, it focuses on those center channel frequencies where normally voice is, and it effectively negates those.
Question from Roy Schultz. I have both Audition and Audacity. Pros and cons of each.
I've been using Audacity for several years now. I find it easier to use. It's like anything else. Anytime you have a free tool that's open source, They put a lot of features and functions in there. There's a lot of good help out there on YouTube, and the help manual, online help manual. But I find that when I'm producing of voiceovers, or more complex audio where I really want to add more effects, or I've got hundreds of plugins that I want to use, or basically I create a workflow, right? You can do a workflow in Audacity, it's just not as easy. So within, say, Adobe Audition, you can create your workflow. And actually, for those of you who've never seen Audition, the other advantage of Audition is it works natively with their other tools. So Premiere Pro, if you're using Premiere Pro for video, this is going to be Audition. If I want to create a new multi-track, if I want to create a voiceover, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go in here. This is a basic one, but I've already got everything set up. So I've got all my media is ready to go. I've got my effects. I can add my effects very easily. Here again, some plugins that I have, so that I purchased for Audition, that for the most part I can use in Audacity, but they're right here. So I can add them to either my clip or my track. And once you set up your workflow, it'll save a ton of time. So let's say I know what I want to do in audio producing. I can go ahead and set up my workflow and my tracks with my effects, and all I got to do is drop it in there, render it, save it, and I'm done. So it's a convenience thing, but there's money you have to put into it, obviously.
2 more questions, Carl. Is timing tracks better made in X-Lights or Audacity?
$1,000 question, right?
I know.
I prefer to do them in X-Lights, to be honest. I find that because then I can actually work with the audio and the sequence, and for me it's easier to do it actually with an X-Lights, because again it's the same plugins, but I can visually see them a lot better than I can using Audacity.
And it looks like the last question we have, is there any suggested filters or effects to make me sound like an elf?
Actually, yeah, you can, and so within it would be in the pitch shifter. So even in Audacity, there is an effect right here. So it would be trying to find it. Change pitch, I think is what they call it. So there's change pitch and change speed. So this is where you would go ahead and do it, and then again you could preview it. So once you did your voice, then you could go in here and you could raise it up and down. And you can see that you got to kind of go through a lot of hoops here. Where, and I know we're running out of time, but I'll show you in Audition. If I wanted to go here and I wanted to add add effect, time and pitch shifter. Here, as you can see, the GUI, it's a lot cleaner. I've got some in here. I can go ahead and change my tones, my half tones. It's a lot more intuitive. So again, within Audacity, it's a little more comprehensive. I have to actually go in there and think about what I'm doing. But again, once you get it set to the way you want it, then you have it set there, and then all you got to do is drop another audio file in there, and you do have, unless you create the workflow or what they call chains, you have to do this every time you do a file, whereas in Audition, you save it as a template, and then you just go back into that template.
Well, I think that about covers everything that we can do. Carl, you did a great job. Carl Mirsky.
Thank you.
We want to thank Boscoyo Studio and Wally's Lights for sponsoring this. And we wish everybody a great day, and stop in and look forward to the next presentation. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Don, and thanks, Don and Bobby. Appreciate it.